Do it again. You got it. It's recording. That's what it
Hey
says.
there, I'm Barry. The co-author of The Road to Recognition is Seth. Say hi, buddy.
Hey, everyone.
Our guest star for this, what's the show called, Seth?
Recognition rock stars.
Right, something like that. We're doing the alliteration thing. Is Jay Baer of Convincing a Verd and the author of so many things. Hey, Jay.
Hello, gents. I have also shaved my head. I'm hiding under this ball cap.
Let me see. It's the Boston U, where his daughter has decided to go to school. I learned a lot of things about you today. Earlier today, I learned that you're a Drew Carey lookalike.
I'm not certain that I am fully bought into that, but people tell me that. I get Drew Carey. I occasionally get John Goodman, which I think is a less flattering comparison, probably.
Drew Carey's better.
And I was in a bar in Boston, ironically, just last week when my daughter was deciding to matriculate, and a woman said that she thought I sounded like Seth Rogen. I don't know if that's true or not. But.
You know what? You actually do. That is, I would not have thought of that.
I had never thought of that either, but she said that she's kind of heard me from behind her and was like, is that Seth Rogen? And I wish.
Well,
I don't smoke nearly enough weed, number one.
There you go.
Or Tree, I learned its nickname is this week. Yeah, I never heard that. Despite all these lookalikes and sound-alikes, you have a pretty good brand with the name Jay Baer. Yeah, otherwise known in your email sometimes as Jason Baer. But
because I changed my name. Do you remember that? Did I know you when I did that?
No.
I don't know if that's true. So, we're talking about recognition and personal branding. So my name is, of course, Jason. That was my Christian name. My parents selected Jason. I was Jason all the way through and until right before I wrote my first book with Amber Ness on the Now Revolution. And I literally changed my name from Jason to Jay, not legally, but for business purposes, for a couple of reasons. One, my Twitter account has always been Jay Baer because everybody always called me Jay in high school. That was kind of my nickname. And when I logged on to Twitter for the first time, I just put Jay, and I should have put Jason. I didn't. I'm like, whatever. And then at the time, there were a lot of other Jasons, and there still are, in digital marketing, right? So you have Jason Falls, you have Jason Miller, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there were very, very few, if any, Jays. And I'm like, well, I already have this domain name, and maybe I should just kind of try and add some separation there. So I went through and changed all my profiles, all my bios, all my email stuff, all my website. It took a long time to kind of get everything sorted out. And now, anytime somebody says Jason, it sounds really weird to me. When I go home to visit my family or my friends, or whatever, somebody will call me that, and it always strikes me as odd now because it's been 8 or 10 years, something like that. But I literally sat down and said, I'm changing my name for business purposes.
There's a lot of folks that have done that. I love, like when Mark Schaefer, he uses his middle initial. I think a lot of folks have done that when they're thinking about how to provide distinction for their name on the web. Because if you Google me, I share the web with this guy who wrote a book called F.U. Seth Price. His name is Seth Price, and he's an artist. So it's not a horrible book, but you don't necessarily want to share the first page of Google with it.
When before my first book came out, when we were still working on it, and it wasn't in Amazon yet. My grandmother, may she rest in peace, had my uncle show her how Amazon worked. And she's like, I want to find Jason's book. And so she went on Amazon, this before the book was out, went on Amazon, searched, and there's an author whose name is the same as mine, who had written a gay photography coffee table book. And she said to my uncle, I thought the book was totally different than this. And so that was the whole lesson for her on Amazon and book release schedules and everything else.
I bet she never forgot that.
Probably not, nor did I.
Call me lucky. I mean,
and that was the day I fired my agent.
I'm one of a lot of Barry Feldmans. I think Feldman might be one of the most popular last names in the world. And amongst the things you can find, or people you can find on search, are lawyers and doctors. Shocking, right? And people in the credits of movies and recording artists and so forth. But the Barry Feldman you'll find when you do Google is mostly me. So I'm a little lucky that
there you go.
Yeah.
They're having a conversation right now on their video show saying, you know what, that Barry Feldman, author, content marketing genius, that guy, I can't get any patients for my chiropractic business because of that guy.
Yeah. So let's talk about personal branding. I guess in a way, we kind of have been. So that's what do you got for us? Let's interview this man.
Well, I'd say the first thing and how I discovered you was watching you speak. And if anyone hasn't watched you speak, you do this. You command a stage and tell stories that relate to, well, currently it's about service and customer service, but marketing in a way that I hadn't seen before. And I'm just curious, like, how did that evolve? Like, you just didn't wake up one day and, commanded the stage. You seem to have really perfected your craft.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yes and no. So my mom is an English teacher. My dad is very effusive. My aunt is a big time kind of corporate trainer, and so I was never raised in a household where people were really shy of speaking, and I just always was okay at it. I was never scared, and so even as like a sophomore in high school, I was the guy who was the MC of everything, like every pep assembly, every talent show, every mock rock. They're like, Jay will do it. Of course, they said Jason. And I had a clip sent to me recently of one of my classmates. We're getting ready to plan a reunion, and she had a clip of me announcing the talent show in 1985. It's pretty great.
Awesome.
And I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty much how I still do it. So to some degree, I just can do it, and I've never been scared by it. People are definitely afraid of public speaking, and I'm so grateful and fortunate I just never have been. But once I started doing it professionally, and it wasn't just sort of a hobby, I'm like, yeah, this is actually a significant part of what I do. Then it's just being smart about it, right? And practice and practice and practice. And I've got a tremendous number of great coaches who I work with all the time. But I'll tell you what the big shift was for me, Seth, was, and you mentioned storytelling, probably 5 years ago or so, and I was, pretty active and busy and all that, but I was talking to a couple of coaches of mine, and they said, you have lots of stories. And I think I was just telling a story at the bar about something. Yeah. And they're like, why isn't that story in one of your talks? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just a story about something that happened to me in high school. Like, yeah, but it's great. Like, you know what all the business ties are. Why don't you just talk more about your stories instead of trying to tell other people's stories? Yeah. And that was a huge kind of light bulb for me. And I think you kind of got to get to the point where you're like, the stories that I have or the observations that I have that include me in the story are worthwhile, right? It's meritorious to say that on stage. And I think it's very common for people who maybe don't have the confidence or haven't been doing it a long time to think, well, let me tell stories about other companies because what has happened to me isn't inherently interesting or worthy of that kind of attention. And so once I sort of realized, hey, I should tell more of my own stories, things really started taking off for me. And I just am working on a new talk right now where it's the same kind of thing. I'm like, and so it's actually more of, it's more of a stand-up style approach is kind of how I go about it, right? Where most stand-ups, especially sort of in modern comedy, it's almost always self-referential, right? And self-experiential. Yeah. And so I try to do that now more and more in my speaking, and it's actually really worked out, but it was very, very hard to do that for a long time. Yeah. And is the current one about hug your haters, or are you working on something new? I'm working on a new one called Talk Triggers. It's called Talk. I've actually never mentioned this anywhere except for right here on your show because I'm literally just working on it. It's called Talk Triggers, how to turn your customers into your best marketers. And it's all about the little things that companies can do. That aren't really necessarily marketing. It's typically more operations that get customers to engage in word of mouth. And all the things that sort of become the little differences in your organization that compel your customers to become word of mouth marketers. So lots of interesting examples and stories. That's fantastic.
Interesting stuff about the lack of fear of speaking. The chapter in the book starts off with my deep research about the fears people have compared to speaking, and apparently something that I read and then reused was that most people would rather be eaten alive by spiders. So apparently you fear being eaten alive by spiders more than speaking.
I do, for sure. I fear lots of things more than I fear speaking, for sure. Long list. But
All
again,
right.
I realize like how unusual that is, right? And it's
Yeah.
it's a gift. It's not like anything that I did. I've just always been like that.
All right, let's talk about, I'm going to quote The Visible Expert. I love The Visible Expert. It's a free ebook from Hinge Marketing, and it's research on how to accelerate. I call it the expertise elevator, or the expert elevator, how to accelerate your path up to having a powerful personal brand. And Lee and his team wrote about you, and several instances actually where you appear. And then there's this page where he talks about the early days. And this is a quote from Jay Baer. I love this. "My network was built on chicken wings and Bud Light," Jay says. "There's no substitute for getting out there and working hard and meeting people." So talk to us about some of your lessons that you've learned in regard to networking.
I am deceptively youthful looking. I am an old man, and so I started doing all this in the pre-internet days, right?
Yeah.
And so, or at least very, very early, where nobody actually knew what the internet was, certainly. And so, quite literally, when I used to live in Phoenix, I spent 10 years. So from the time I was 21 until the time I was 30. That's when I started my count. 21 to 30, so 9 years. I went to 4 networking events at least a week, every week for 10 years.
Wow.
Every week for 10 years, right? So I would go to 200 a year, right? So I probably went to 2,000 networking events in a decade, right? And it got to the point where I knew everybody in Phoenix that I needed to know fundamentally from a business standpoint. And that wasn't because I had a personal brand or a blog or a podcast or a video show, or I wasn't doing any speaking then either. It's just that I just put so much time into it that you just kind of ended up hooking it up, right? And you just sort of wired the town. And that kind of work enabled my company at the time to be the #1 online marketing web strategy firm in the Southwest for 5 or 6 years in a row.
Wow.
Before we sold it. And it wasn't sort of any sort of secret. It was just out there hustling it, right? And people lose that now. And it cracks me up when I hear people, typically, this isn't really a millennial thing, but typically it's younger people who come up to me and say, "Boy, I know I really should be out there doing more in social media and creating more content to work on my personal brand, but it's just too hard. It just takes up too much time." I'm like, too much time? Like, all you got to do is sit at your desk in your underpants and send some emails and type out some tweets. Like, give me a break, man.
Yeah.
Try having to go to like Rotary and Lions and Kiwanis and the Moose Club and all this bullshit every night for 10 years, and then get back.
I always say it beats lifting heavy things.
Oh my God. So, I was actually really thin when I started personal branding. And then after 10 years of evening networking events, I turned out like this.
All the chicken wings.
All the chicken wings and Bud Light.
That's awesome. So
now I don't even drink Bud Light. I think that's why. I was like, I can't do it anymore.
You're a tequila guy.
One of the things that you do really naturally, it seems, and we have a chapter on the book about it, which is helping. And I experienced it firsthand. Barry and I experienced it because you wrote the foreword for our book. Which is pretty amazing.
Make sure you buy the book, okay?
And look, and if you want to know what it looks like, it's
over Seth's shoulder.
Yeah, it's right there. There it is,
so
right
make
there.
Make sure you buy the book. It's awesome. You're going to learn a lot, and buy a couple copies. So you're going to want one, but I guarantee you're going to get 10 pages into it. Actually, probably just read the foreword and be like, "That foreword's amazing," and you're going to want to give that book to somebody else. So make sure you buy at least 2.
Yeah. Well, the point that I was getting at, which I won, yes, buy the book, but we're in this sort of speaking group together, and you were amazingly generous, like just generous with your time, generous with your advice and encouragement. And it seems to be part of your DNA. Talk to us about how that impacts your business.
Thank you. I think it is part of my DNA, and I've always operated like that going back, 25 years. I just feel like, I guess here's my operating principle, okay? and I genuinely believe this, maybe it's corny, but I feel like everybody is competition, but nobody is competition.
Yeah.
Right. That competitors are just collaborators that you haven't gotten around to doing a deal with yet. And so I'm always thinking about the long game. And one of the things that bothers me about business people and folks who are really struggling to achieve their personal branding vision is that they're always looking at it through such a short time horizon. It's like, well, what am I going to do this month? Or how's my business doing this quarter? Or what do I want my personal brand to be by the end of the year? I'm like, no. You got to look out, right? You got to be thinking 3, 5, 10 years down the road. And a lot of the decisions that I make today are not going to pay off for me for 3, 5, 7, 10 years. And I'm totally okay with that, right?
Yeah.
You're always planting seeds. Look, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today.
Yeah.
And that's just sort of how I've always kind of operated, right? And I think it's because my grandfather and my father were both super into organizations. They were joiners, as I am a joiner. Yeah. And my grandfather and my dad were president of all the things that you can be president of, and I have been also. And it's just sort of how we roll. I think because we're from a small town originally in Nebraska, and where every customer is a friend and every friend is a customer, and like it's such a small town that you can't really operate in any other way. Yeah. And I just feel like that, through sort of osmosis, kind of became my principle.
Yeah. It seems to be like today in our attention starved world, it's one of the things that stands out when you meet someone. Like if someone is generally interested in you, you're like, oh, this is different. So I really appreciate that.
Thanks. Someday the chickens will come home to roost. I'll come calling.
Yeah, exactly.
H is for helping. H is for helping. J is for joining. We're dictating.
Well, that's why I wrote a whole book about helping, right? I mean, I wrote a whole 200 and something pages about that, and it actually works.
Yeah.
Help. What's the subtitle of the book?
Why smart marketing is about help, not hype.
Right on. All right, last question for you, Jay. I like this. We haven't covered every chapter, but maybe by the time I'm done with my question, we will. We have a chapter about targeting. We have a chapter about achieving a unique selling proposition, whereby you sort of perfect your niche and your elevator speech and so forth. And then we have a chapter called Why is for You Do, which is about making choices, the things that you do daily and quarterly and making long-term, like you just talked about. And so once again, I'm quoting you from The Visible Expert, which I think you could probably call a book about personal branding, kind of specific.
A little bit, yeah.
Professional services. You say we come up with a list of 15% of activities, or you say every year we look at what we've done. So we is convincing convert, but your brand too. I think we've come up with a list of 15% of activities that didn't get us ahead, and we stopped doing them. The trick is running a successful business. The trick to running a successful business is to figure out what you are uniquely qualified to do, and then do only that. I love that. Talk to me about
that. People have asked me in the past, like, when did you know you made it, or how do you define success? Like I get those kind of questions sometimes on entrepreneurship podcasts.
Yeah.
And I always answer it the same way, which is I'm there and have been for a while, because I define success thusly. I only spend time on things I want to spend time on. Period. And we don't take clients we don't want to take. Yeah. We don't do projects we don't want to do. I don't do podcasts I don't want to appear on. Like, I decide 100% of how I spend my time. And to me, everything else, if you can get to that point, everything else is just gravy.
Yeah.
Right? Money is gravy. The recognition, that's all just like frosting on the cake, right? And one of the ways we've been able to do that as an organization at Convince and Convert is by being wise about who does what and how resources are deployed. Yeah. So one of the classic traps that entrepreneurs make, and people who I think are interested in personal branding are entrepreneurs of their own success, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you're self-employed or not is irrelevant. If you're interested in personal branding, you are starting a business, and that business is your own recognition. Yeah. Right? It is a company of your own design, which is I want more people to know me. So from that perspective, one of the traps is to say I have to do all the things.
Yeah.
because I'm really good at all the things. Therefore, I must do all the things. I can do these things better than anybody else, especially because it's personal branding. Nobody else can do my personal brand but me, which is completely bullshit. So what we do at Convince and Convert is every year we audit my time. Like, what am I spending all my time on? And we try to take 15% of that time away and give it to somebody else on the team. And so when you do that year after year after year after year, what happens is that the number of things that I do gets smaller, but I'm more concentrated on those things, right? So if you cook at all, people who are watching, if you ever cook and you make a sauce, right? So you got a saucepan and you start off with like 3 cups of liquid. And you're like, this is not going to, how can this be a sauce, right? This is like water with a brown crayon dipped in it. Yeah. But then you boil it down and boil it down and boil it down, and it gets thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker until it's like a gravy, right?
Yeah.
Same thing happens with your time. You want to kind of make that gravy with your time and say, look, what are the things that nobody else literally can do? Not that I would prefer to do, but what can nobody else do? And the more you can devote your time to those things, the better off you'll be. Look, I'm not embarrassed to admit it. We have a community manager at Convince and Convert who does some of my social media. I mean, she sends tweets under my name and does some other stuff under my name. I obviously know what's going on, generally speaking, but I'm not so foolish to suggest that I have to type every single letter of every single tweet. I don't have time for that, nor am I uniquely qualified to do that. Like if the tweet is, here's the blog post I wrote, she can type the headline of the blog post just as easily as I can, right? And so why am I wasting my time doing that?
Yeah. That's fantastic. I mean, I think that's one of the entrepreneur's dilemmas, but just anybody who feels like they've got any skin in the game, like they're good at something, relinquishing control is the hardest thing. And it also may be what got them there in the first place.
That's such a great point, Seth, and I couldn't agree more. A lot of times you're more scared because you're like, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like I've been a control freak forever. Why are you telling me to not be a control freak? Because the reason I'm successful is because I'm a control freak. It's like, but at some point you start bumping it up against your natural level, right? And I'll give you an example. Until 2 years ago, okay, I still sent out every invoice in our company myself.
Yes. Oh God, that's crazy.
And took every check. And took every check to the bank personally. Got in my car and drove to the bank every check. Multi-million-dollar company with people and clients all over the globe, and I was sending every invoice myself, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. But when you're doing it, it doesn't seem ridiculous.
Yeah, you're like, I've always done it, so it's just one of the things I do every week. Yeah. And then we went through one of these sessions where we were trying to replace my time, and our COO is like, you're not some sort of like QuickBook wizard. Like anybody can press send on the first of the month. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. But that was hard because you're like, okay, I want to control the money. I want to know what's coming in and what's coming out and who's paying us and who's not paying us. But over time, I've gotten to the point now. I have no idea how much money we have. Literally, we could be out of business right now, and I wouldn't know. Well, and I actually think that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
Well, driving to the bank's at least the fun part of it, right? So, but you got to let go. Somebody told me once, "Do you have an assistant?" And I said no, and they go, "That means you are an assistant."
I love that. I've never heard that phrase, but it's terrific. And that's really good.
All right, so I'm Barry, co-author. Co-host is Seth, and that guy that gave us such useful information today is John Goodman.
This is Drew Carey's older brother.
Thank you so much for your time.
I got to just say though, Price is Right, my favorite game show. So if Drew Carey's watching, and I'm sure he is likely, when he's sick of that gig, I'm all in on that gig. You would crush it. The only thing I would rather do than what I'm doing right now is host The Price is Right. So I'm not kidding. I'm not saying that for effect or to be funny. Like that is the only thing I really want to do is Drew Carey's job, ironically. So.
Awesome. Jay, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your time.
We need to find somebody who can slowly poison Drew Carey.
I want to quote you on that, and then I got to use that gravy thing too.
You got it.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
See you, boys.
Barry, great job. Jay, thank you.